K98talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98talk.com.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
You know what time it is, so sit back and get ready for the Stafford Voice, your dose of conservative in a world of liberal.
3, 2, 1.
Good evening, and how are you doing? I am your host, Daniel Stafford, host of the Stafford Voice, where we are conservative in a world of liberal. Tonight, I've got an incredible guest. We've got tons of stuff to talk about afterwards, and as you know, there's like this financial crisis of 2015. It's full blaze right now, so that's what we're going to talk with our guest about tonight. Before we jump in with that, I want to remind you there are so many different ways to listen. So wherever you're at, set its channel as a favorite. Whatever you have to do so you don't get left behind. And if for some strange, crazy reason you do miss the show, you can catch the replay, so just sit tight. There's no need to panic. I've got you. And if you are not following on social media, you can find me on Twitter at Stafford Voice, and as well as on Facebook. All you got to do is head on over there, search for the Stafford Voice, and boom, there we are. Also, follow the rest of the crew and all the other hosts here with the station. And make sure you send some love to them because they give us a home to broadcast. Absolutely love them guys and love everybody else that's on the lineup. Also, I need to introduce my guest. And really, he doesn't need any introduction at all. Every weekend, you turn on your favorite news station, and boom, there he is. You're going to watch him. None other than the Jonathan Hoenig. You see him every weekend talking about finances and what's going on out there in the world. And today we are joined by Jonathan himself. Jonathan, how are you?
Well, I'm just delighted you had me in on such a wonderful day for the economy and the stock market, Daniel. It's great to be with you.
Well, I don't know about you, but when I woke up this morning and I looked at things, I wasn't too happy. So I wanted to reach out to you and kind of get some answers as to what was happening. You know, I was driving in and I kept hearing about how China was there. They closed at like 8.5% below. They lost huge. And I just couldn't get it off my chest. I mean, it was sitting pretty heavy with me that we were getting ready to watch a roller coaster ride, if you will. So can you explain kind of what's happening? I mean, this pretty much started last week, right?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we have seen a global sell-off in stocks. And it's not unprecedented to see that before, although some of the numbers we've seen are unprecedented. I mean, you mentioned last night the Chinese stock market, of which is highly linked and highly correlated to our own market here at home, dropped by about 8%. And in fact, this morning, that rout continued on. And at one point, our own market, the Dow Jones here in America, was down 1,000 points. And that's a historic drop in terms of points. So a lot of people are already calling this Black Monday. It's a kind of a subtle reference to the 1987 stock market crash, but it's not exactly apt, Daniel. And back in 1987, the stock market fell 20% in one day. We didn't have anywhere near that type of a rout today. The market only down 3 and 4%, but still pretty surprising and pretty shocking to a lot of people who, especially in a few years, have gotten used to the market only going one way, and that's up.
Yeah, but so when we get on the internet, we get on Drudge Report, for instance, and there are 15 doom and gloom links and headlines. You head over to Fox News, and you're going to see doom and gloom. You got this big, huge red box that says, at the end of today, the stock market closed in the negative of what, 585, 588. When people sit down at their dinner table and they look across and they wonder, how much did we lose? Are we going to be able to make it when we retire? What does all of this mean for the average consumer, the average person?
Well, ironically, if you're like most investors who are looking a year, 3 years, 5 years, or a decade out, even a day like today, I mean, a sell-off like you really haven't seen in years shouldn't make that much of a difference. And it's hard to have that type of perspective, especially, as you said, when news of this massive sell-off is on social media and online and everywhere you look, it's the front page news. So it's very hard when emotions run high to try to get that perspective. But when you take a step back and remember why you're investing in the first place, why you're looking at stocks as an asset class in the first place, it's not for one day or for 2 days or even for a week. It is for that long-term perspective. And, go back to 1987, as I pointed out. I mean, that's the stock market crash most people think of and most people reference. In 1987, the market actually ended up for that year. So in the midst of a sell-off like we've seen, it's very easy to get emotional. It's very easy to want to run for the hills and think only short term. But you need to try to look a little bit further out than tomorrow morning's headlines. And to tell you, I would follow the advice of J.P. Morgan, who famously said, over 100 years now, he said you should sell down to the sleeping point. And if you're so heavily invested in the stock market that a 3 or 5 or even 10% correction is enough to challenge your lifestyle, then you might want to think about cutting back even a little bit on that type of risk.
Okay, so short term, we're going to be okay. Long term, the outlook looks really good. But so what led up to this point? What led up to what we saw over in the Asian markets?
Well, a few things. One of which has just been good times for a long time. It's been over 3.5 years since the stock market here at home has had any type of a meaningful correction, 10% down. So we've ironically had a long period of a very good returns for stocks and for markets. So in many ways, we had this coming, not just from a time perspective, but also from a valuation perspective as well. And a lot of stocks, think about the Facebooks and the LinkedIns and the Twitters of the world, had gotten very, very expensive. So in that sense, as you pointed out, looking longer term, corrections like this are actually quite healthy. They take some of the froth out of stocks, froth out of the market, and allow it to build a base to move higher. So overvaluation is one of the reasons. The other, and you alluded to this when you talked about China, is just worries about slowing growth. China has been just a major growth engine of the world for nearly a decade now, and not only in terms of potential for businesses to do business in China, but also their hunger for commodities and for consumption. Think about all the oil prices and gold prices and agricultural prices, which have been buoyed because of demand from China. So at least for now, as China goes, so goes the world, and so goes the world's market. So as people have gotten very frightened about losses in Chinese markets, they're selling everywhere. And they're selling in Europe, they're selling in Asia, they're selling in Latin America, and here at home. And interestingly, David, the least free countries, I should say, countries with the most financial intervention and manipulation have been hurt the most. And China's at the top of the list. That is anything but a free economy. And in fact, their government has stepped in to try to prop up their stock market, and they've made, selling short illegal and taken all these steps to try to manipulate their own economy. It hasn't worked. And in fact, that's one of the reasons I think you've seen such a violent reaction in the Chinese stock market and in stock markets worldwide. So, you never want to bet against the U.S. long term, and I certainly don't. But in the short term, there's no question we're going to get some volatility. I don't think necessarily we've hit the bottom just yet. Markets have all the time in the world, and that's why it's important, for any average investor, to try to take that long-term perspective and to spread it out. These days there's so many ways to diversify your holdings, not just between stocks and bonds and gold and different types of assets, but even just good old American cash, the greenback. Most people don't have what should be the basis of any investment program, and that's 6 months worth of living expenses, literally just sitting in the bank. And Danny, when you have that type of security, just some cash on the side, that, a month from now, 2 months from now, your rent, your mortgage can be paid. It makes getting through these tough times, it makes being a stronger investor during these tough times that much easier. So don't let your emotions run wild. And when markets do tank, you know that you've got some cheese on the side to make that emotion just much easier to handle.
Okay, so, and I totally understand that. I totally believe in having 3 to 6 months of on-hand cash. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love that idea, working on that myself and building it beyond. But here in the United States, over the last, year and a half, from the feds, all we hear is quantitative easing. We hear about how they're pumping more cash into the system. What does all of that mean, and how does that play into this market correction that we're seeing? Jonathan?
We talked just a moment ago about the effect of government intervention in the markets, how intervention from China and even our own Federal Reserve here at home makes them more erratic, more volatile, more unstable. And that's one of the reasons, in fact, I think you've seen what you've seen in our own stock market. These days, you don't just have to analyze the economy. You don't just have to figure out, how many pairs of Huggies that Walmart sold in the last quarter. But you've got to try to think about what our own government's going to do in terms of manipulating interest rates, in terms of manipulating the economy. So there's no question that interest rates so low for so long has encouraged what's called malinvestment, basically people making decisions based on artificial circumstances like interest rates at all those. So we're going to see some blow-offs one way or the other, because there's no question people have made investment decisions based on faulty premises, and premises being that interest rates are going to stay low forever. They're not. And I think that's one of the big factors investors have to consider right now, is not just what the economy is going to do, but what the Federal Reserve is going to do. And that makes investing even more difficult. And it's another reason why I think that volatility, especially in the short term, is going to persist.
Okay, so in your professional advice, you're going to advise people just to relax, calm down, and stick with it, right?
Well, I think it depends on your situation. Investing in the stock market is different for each individual based on where they are in their life and what their goals are. So I think if you're in your 30s or 40s and looking out, 10, 12 years in terms of your own time horizon, a blip like this shouldn't make that big of a difference. And for the best example of that, just look at a long-term history of chart of the stock market. In 1987, really looks like nothing when you start to look out 10, 15 years. If you're have more of a short-term time horizon, if you're planning on retiring in a year or buying a house within the next year or so, you obviously want to try to cut back on your risk. And the way I would do it actually is not to just wake up one morning and sell indiscriminately, but take a look at your portfolio and focus on the assets that haven't worked as much. We have a tendency to want to sell the winners and keep the losers in our portfolio. You should actually get in the habit of doing just the opposite, selling the losers and trying to let the winners run. So if you have a mutual fund investment that's performed well, that you've made money in, I just don't see one day's drop in the market, even if it's a 1,000-point drop, as a reason to exit that strategy, because this too shall pass. I don't think the economy is headed for a crash, for an implosion, certainly not what we saw in 2008. And I think even in today's volatility, everyone should have at least some of their assets in the U.S. stock market, still the strongest in the world.
So in your opinion, you think that a lot of people have learned their lessons from these past little blips on the radar, like in 2008, and we've definitely learned from 1987, as you say. So has the consumer themselves learned a little better? Have the investors learned how to watch for these things?
I think investors have. Since 2008, what have most people done? Very smartly, they've worked to pay down their debt. They've worked to increase their savings. They've worked to take on financial responsibilities that they know they can afford, like homes they can afford. So I think the average Joe six-pack, if you will, has done quite well. Who hasn't been following that advice, unfortunately, is our own government. They've continued to spend, to rack up the debt, to continuing to manipulate interest rates in currency markets. So I think that's where the real risk right now is not so much of what the average investor is going to do, but to tally back to what you said before, what's our own government going to do? What's the Federal Reserve going to do? So, it creates that fear, it creates that contagion, because people aren't so worried about the economy, they're worried about the Federal Reserve, they're worried about the government. So, you can't put outside the possibility of some type of a contagion, but, when it comes to everyone's investments, everyday people's investments, you just can't get too cute. I mean, the notion that you can jump out of the stock market one day, jump back in the next at significantly lower prices, the best minds on Wall Street aren't that smart. So for everyday investors, I think the best thing is to craft a portfolio that you can live with. Some portion in stocks, some portion in bonds, some portion in gold, and some portion in cash, and then stick with it in the good times and bad. And I think that's really the key to long-term success. Not trading day to day to day, but trying to look a little further out on the time horizon, living within your means, and investing for the long term.
Well, Jonathan, I think that's excellent advice. Again, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I know it's pretty late where you're at, but I just, again, want to say thank you. For all of our listeners out there, how can they get in contact with you on social media? What's your website? Where can they reach out, and where can they learn a little bit more about what you're talking about?
Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate that. I mean, my website is capitalistpig.com. Again, that's capitalistpig.com, and I manage money for high net worth investors and have some other programs that I offer at capitalistpig.com. My Twitter handle is @Jonathan Hoenig. You can find it all there. So all that information, once again, is at capitalistpig.com, and really appreciate the opportunity to join you tonight.
Jonathan, thanks again. We're going to let you go, and if we have more questions, we know how to get in contact with you. I appreciate it, buddy.
Anytime. Thanks again.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what? I'm going to have to digest some of that stuff that he was talking about. The last thing we really want to do is get ahead of ourselves, and we see that with traditional media. Traditional media tends to blow things out of control, and a lot of it's because of ratings. They want to scare the crap out of you, and they want to get people to their website. They want to make money. But it's more important to go out there and search for those that are in the trenches, those who are out there who are doing it daily. Informational resource like Jonathan Hoenig, really, really appreciate him stepping up and coming onto the show tonight. And basically on short notice, I reached out to him early this afternoon and gladly accepted. So again, thank you, Jonathan. And great advice. If you're going to jump into the stock market, you're going to do it for the long term. It's just like stocking up on bullets. You do it for the long term. You don't go out and buy 5 rounds in the hopes that you're going to defend yourself or defend your home. You're going to buy thousands of rounds. It's almost, hey, buying weapons, buying rounds, it's like investing. Well, you know what? We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to jump into kind of our normal routine. I wanted to bring our guest on just right out of the gate. It's great guest. And then, so When we come back from a break, we're going to talk about the campaign. We're going to about what happened during the weekend. Hours and hours and hours of speeches were given. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Planned Parenthood. I really hope that I can get through talking about that. But you know what? We're going to take a break. I'm Daniel Stafford, host of the Stafford Voice. We'll be right back.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan. This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
The feeling most people get when they hear a Barack Obama speech, I felt this thrill going up my leg. I mean, I don't have that too often.
Steady.
It's time to hear the truth about America's biggest challenges. Ricky Robinson, host of America Off the Rails, will tackle the important issues facing America today as he tries to keep America from coming off the track. Get ready to hear the truth every Monday through Friday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, and on Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern and 11 Central here on K98Talk.com and the Spark Radio Network.
Welcome to the face. Welcome to the face of the new democracy.
Red Nation Rising brings you Town Hall Radio.
From a single tweet to 3 million a month, our community is a force to be reckoned with on social media.
So don't miss our show, Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern on K98 Talk.
Our chat room is our co-host, and you ask the question.
Join us and be heard.
So get ready to sound off on Red Nation Rising Radio. No one else is going to do it for you.
There's a wild, wild whisper blowing in the wind, calling out my name like a
I'm not the type of guy that jumps into anything without first doing my research. And when I was looking for a holster, I'll admit I was having one heck of a time. You know what I'm talking about here. You find one you like, you try it on, it would be clunky. Another one fits good, but costs way too much. So you try on one last holster, it was slim, lightweight, priced right, but lo and behold, you slide your pistol in, and it falls right out. So what do? You've tried all these mass market holsters. Well, go custom. I know what you're thinking. I thought it too. Too pricey. Wrong. My guy over at Rebel Road Tactical will not only put together the perfect fitting, hand-molded, hand-assembled, custom Kydex holster, but you'll get it at an affordable price. Don't wait. Contact Rebel Road Tactical today at 682-217-4579. Again, that's 682-217-4579. Place your order.
As a distinguished gentleman, I need a serious source of news. One that doesn't waste my time when I'm enjoying my tea and crumpets.
White powdered! White powdered!
One that catches the most important stories of the day.
The poop plane.
Was it jet poop? Real serious nonsense. Mondays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, now on K98 Talk.
Gonna just move in another direction towards the classy.
We'll be classy and not say dildo.
They're completely different from shows that aren't.
Call now. 913-440-4889.
All right, and we are back. We are back, yes. You are listening to the Stafford Voice. You know, back in 1856, Alexis de Tocqueville said, quote, "I have often asked myself, what was the source of that passion for political liberty which has inspired the greatest deeds of which mankind can boast? In what feelings does it take root? From whence does it derive nourishment? It is the intrinsic attractions of freedom, its own peculiar charm, quite independently of its incidental benefits, which have seized so strong a hold on the great champions of liberty throughout history. They loved it because they loved the pleasure of being able to speak, to act, to breathe unrestrained, under the sole government of God and the laws. He who seeks freedom for anything but freedom's self is made to be a slave. I wanted to touch on that because, as you know, the campaigns are in full force right now. Whether we want to accept it or not, it's starting to get ridiculous. I mean, when a guy has to sit and spend all weekend listening and pouring out through, 8, 9, 10 hours worth of audio, worth of campaign speech after campaign speech, and wait, watch. He's gonna flip a burger. Oh my God. Somebody call Fox News! Ted Cruz flips burgers with his left hand. Seriously. Okay. So, I took it upon myself, and what we're going to do, and I think that we'll probably do this every week, at least as we get through this and we try and help, we as grassroots, we try and help whittle these voices down. There were umpteen hours of speeches, some of which were given by the same guy. Oh, to holy hell, I had to listen to about 4 hours of trumpets that were totally out of tune. Now, yeah, funny, because at one point he took, probably the funniest thing that I watched the trumpet do in 4 or 5 hours worth of video and audio was when he's addressing this humongous crowd. I mean, it's estimates of over 30,000 people in this stadium. He takes his hat off and he says, "You know what? If it starts raining, I'll prove it to you. I'll take my hat off. I'll prove this is mine." Funny line. So, what can you expect? This is, apologize again, but I spent all weekend going through this. I don't have any lead up or any cool sound effects. I wanted to have some crazy little horse trot with one of those whips, and you got one of them cowboys doing a yeah or something. We're going to call this little segment called Campaign Roundup, and I apologize. Hopefully, as we take this roller coaster ride throughout the next year and a half of listening to these campaign speeches, we don't have sound bites that are this long. I'm going to apologize right now. It's 11 minutes long, but again, it's like a minute or two per hour of listening to all of that. Oh, I actually had a headache from listening, and I recovered from it earlier this afternoon, finally. So, this week's Campaign Roundup is full of the best of from all of the audio. So, we're going to go ahead and roll that. When we come back, we'll talk about Planned Parenthood.
That's an offensive term. People find that hurtful.
You mean it's not politically correct, and yet everybody uses it? So you know what? Give me a different term. Give me a different term. What else would you like to say?
The American-born child is an undocumented immigrant.
You want me to say that? Okay. No, I'll use the word anchor baby. Excuse me. I'll use the word anchor baby.
And that's what Planned Parenthood is doing. They're treating these children in the womb as if, well, they're not real human beings. Except the problem here with these videos is that they're harvesting human body parts. So it's sort of hard to make the argument these aren't human beings when they're harvesting human organs. The most recent video may be the most abhorrent, the interview with someone who described a procedure where a little boy was born alive. In fact, made a point of showing that the little boy's heart was beating. So the baby survived an abortion and was still alive, but it didn't deter her at all from taking out the little boy's brain while he was alive. But of course, that doesn't horrify anybody who are supporters of Planned Parenthood. This doesn't bother people. Why? Because, well, it's, this is just the ugly business of what abortion is. I mean, these are children that, these are not wanted, and therefore they're subhuman, and we can treat them. We can treat little children alive And we can remove their head, we can remove their brains. And we can talk about it. Isn't this cool? Isn't this neat? Look, I can tap their chest and you can see their heart beating. And it doesn't seem to affect the moral compass of any of our leaders in Washington, D.C., that this is somehow beyond the pale, that somehow or another this doesn't speak well for who we are as a human race here in America, as a society. But no, it just doesn't seem to bother anybody because we've succeeded in dehumanizing. Dehumanizing. That's what this is all about. Yet we're dehumanizing children who are being harvested for human body parts.
We're seeing Bible-believing Christians being persecuted. We are a country that respects pluralism and diversity, and there is this liberal intolerance that says that anyone that dares follow a biblical teaching of marriage, that is the union of one man and one woman, must be persecuted, must be fined, and must be driven out of business. Right now, do you know where gay people are being persecuted right now? ISIS.
All over the world.
ISIS is executing gay people. Iran is executing homosexuals.
Yes.
And on the left, you hear complete silence about Iran hanging homosexuals, and yet the Obama administration is sending over $100 billion to a regime that murders homosexuals. That is fundamentally wrong.
Along comes the government and says, this is what we're doing. We don't care what you, the people, think. We're shoving it down your throat, and if you don't like it, too bad. That's a fundamental change, and you know what? It's the beginning of a big change in America unless we, the people, decide that we're not going to have it. We have to be the ones who make that decision. However, they do provide comic relief. You know, I'm very pro-life. And when you look back at the history of our country, and you look at some of the stories that are well documented, you know that God played an important role in who we are. And even though the president says we're not a Judeo-Christian nation, he doesn't get to decide. We get to decide what kind of nation we are.
No action. What's happening to this country is disgraceful. But we have politicians that don't have a clue. They're all talk. They're no action. What's happening to this country is disgraceful. There's a little dicey. That's okay. But who cares? If it rains, right? You know, if it rains, I'll take off my hat and I'll prove once and for all that it's mine. Some bad things came out today. You know, those classified. You know the word classified. You know, they've destroyed General Petraeus over less. And nothing seems to be happening here. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens ultimately. What's my first favorite book? The Bible. The Bible. CNN does this big report that came out last week, so I was leading in the polls. It was a poll. And everybody says, why don't I have a pollster? What the hell do I need a pollster? Every day I wake up, there's another poll. Right? You know, they pay these guys like $100,000 a month, and they can't function because unless they go and have it vetted with their pollster, they can't talk. And I say, why do I need a pollster when every day there's a new poll and they give like 30 pages? I don't have to get a pollster. What the hell do I need it? Save your money. Okay. CNN did this really very, very expensive, very well done poll. It's only well done because I was leading by a lot. If it wasn't, I'd say it wasn't. And in the poll, I score really high marks on almost everything. Other than they thought I wasn't a nice person. They said, who's the nicest? And I was like pretty low on that board. And I'm a nice person. But who cares? A woman came up to me. She said, I'm not sure that you're nice enough to be president. I said, you know what? This is not going to be an election based on a nice person. It's going to be based on a competent person. We're tired of the nice people.
If this deal goes through, the Obama administration will become, quite literally, the world's leading financier of radical Islamic terrorism. He interrupted his busy foreign travels in between the 8th and 9th holes to attack me directly. He said, that's ridiculous. Cruz can't say such a thing. That rhetoric is too much. Let me give you a very, very simple principle. Truth is not rhetoric. You know, Scripture tells us there is nothing new under the sun. I think where we are today is very, very much like the late 1970s. I think the parallels between this administration and the Carter administration are uncanny. Same failed economic policy, same misery, stagnation, and malaise. Same feckless and naive foreign policy. In fact, the exact same countries, Russia and Iran, openly laughing at and mocking the President of the United States. Now, why is it that that analogy gives me so much hope and optimism? Because we know how that story ended. All across this country, millions of men and women rose up and became the Reagan Revolution. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go?
If we want to stop the spread of crony capitalism, what we must do is not just reduce the size and power and weight of the federal government, we must simplify a 73,000-page tax code. Look, science is proving us right every day, but you do not have to be pro-life to understand the hideous nature of what is going on here. This is about the moral character of our nation. When you can have employees who target poor communities, who are pushing women into later term abortion so they can more successfully harvest body parts, even though late term abortions are demonstrably bad for women, you can only be horrified when you see employees picking over a petri dish for body parts while they say, look, it's a baby. There is no excuse. Planned Parenthood must be defunded.
There is a war on faith in America today. Think of the stories on this stage. These are people for whom right and truth will always mean more than going along to get along or looking the other way when right is replaced with what is wrong. That those who support them have demonstrated an utter disregard for human life. Innocent life should not be up for debate. An innocent life should not be treated as a business transaction. Life is a precious gift from God. As Thomas Jefferson proclaimed, the God who gave us life gave us liberty. Once the government can take away the right to life, it can take away anything, even marriage. We have a federal government that comes after our free speech rights, that comes after our religious liberty, that comes after life, that comes after marriage, that comes after our values. It is because 54 million evangelical Christians stayed home. Well, I'm here to tell you, we will stay home no longer. Be shut out because we still hold truths to be self-evident. We will not be silent. We will not take court rulings as a mandate to forget our faith while Washington elites try to force their values. God's not dead. Neither is America, and her love of freedom and our people's willingness to defend our freedom.
This is the most extraordinary country on the face of the planet because our founders knew what my mother taught me, that everybody has God-given gifts. I'm a conservative because I know no one of us is any better than any other one of us. Every one of us is gifted by God. Every one of us has the capacity to live a life of dignity and purpose and meaning. And our founders created a country in which you had a right to find and use your God-given gifts to fulfill your potential. That is what they meant when they said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So let me leave you with what this country must be. Think of Lady Liberty. She stands tall and strong, as America must always be. She is clear-eyed and resolute. She doesn't shield her eyes from the realities of the world, but she looks out into the world, as America always must, and she holds her torch high, because she knows she is a beacon of hope in a troubled world. And Lady Justice, who holds a sword at her side because she's a fighter. She is a warrior for the values and the principles that have made this nation great. She holds a scale. And with that scale, she says all of us are equal in the eyes of God, and so all of us must be equal in the eyes of the law and government, powerful and powerless alike. And she wears a blindfold. And with that blindfold, I believe she says that it must be true. That in this nation, in this century, and ladies and gentlemen, it can be true. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter your circumstances, and it doesn't matter how you start. Here in this nation, every American's life must be filled with the possibilities that come from their God-given gifts with liberty and justice for all.
That is why all of us are here today. Because we are not prepared to go quietly into the night. We are not willing to give up on our children and grandchildren. We will stand and fight for freedom. We will stand and fight for the Constitution. And mark my words, together the American people are waking up. Thanks to the hard work of every person gathered here, we are lighting a fire, and together we will restore that shining city on a hill that is the United States of America.
Okay, there were a couple of parts in there that sounded really familiar. I don't know if they were going through some of our archives here on the show, but you know, that shining city on a hill, you know, talking about Lady Liberty, there were some really, really good speeches that were given out on the trail over the weekend. I would invite any of you to head out there and catch up on them. If anything, I think that what we tried to capture there was the best parts of what they had to offer. And the last two, obviously, are Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina. And I really wanted to highlight what they said and really cap it off with that, because that in itself describes what we have to do and why we do it. It's just absolutely incredible that there really are. There are people out there ready to fight. I mean, you guys know this. You guys are the smartest audience in all of talk radio. You guys are the most well-read, well-spoken people out there. And what we've really got to do is work to push the message that some of the candidates out there really are saying, and the deaf, dumb, and blind are deaf, dumb, and blind to what they're seeing and hearing and feeling. Some of those speakers had dead silent audiences because what they were teaching was like graduate level college course material. They were just saying some spectacular things. Now, something a little less spectacular, and unfortunately, I toyed with this idea of, I toyed with it all the way up until about 10 minutes before starting the show, whether I was going to play this or not. And I talked a lot of smack to some people last week. I don't do a lot of smack talk on social media. I really don't. I try and stay away from it. But if I was a candidate, what you are about to hear would be playing on a screen. It would be blasted across the loudspeaker. The whole time I was giving a speech, anywhere I went, you would see it and you would hear it, because this is the embodiment of the Democrat Party. What you are about to hear is the embodiment of the Democrat Party. And when we come back, I'm going to give you a few thoughts on that, and then we'll get on with the rest of the show.
The strainer, rinsing it off, putting water in the pie dish, and getting it ready for the doctor. So then I hear her call my name. Hey, Ollie, come over here. I want you to see something kind of cool. It's kind of neat. So I'm over here, and this is the moment I see it, I'm just flabbergasted. This is the most gestated fetus and closest thing to a baby I've seen. And she's like, okay, I want to show you something. So she has one of her instruments, and she just taps the heart, and it starts beating. And I'm sitting here, and I'm looking at this fetus, and its heart is beating, and I don't know what to think. And I knew why it was happening. It's because the electrical current was, the nodes were still firing, and I don't know if that constitutes it's technically dead or it's alive. It had a face. It wasn't completely torn up, and its nose was very pronounced. It had eyelids, and its mouth was pronounced. And then, since the fetus was so intact, she said, okay, well, this is a really good fetus, and it looks like we can procure a lot from it. We're going to procure a brain. So, the moment I hear something like, that means we're going to have to cut the head open. We're going to have to cut the head open. So, it's like, okay, so what you do is you go through the face. I'm thinking, no, I don't want to do this. And she takes the scissors and she makes a small incision right here and goes, I would say, to maybe a little bit through the mouth. And she's like, okay, can you go the rest of the way? And I'm like, yes. And I didn't want to do this. And so she gave me the scissors and told me that I have to cut down the middle of the face. And I can't even, like, describe, like, what that feels like. And I remember picking it up and finishing going through the rest of the face. And Jessica picking up the brain and putting it in the container with the media. And parafilming it. And she left and she's like, okay, you can clean it up. And I'm just sitting there like, what did I just do? And that was the moment I knew I couldn't work for the company anymore. And that was still, it was, even if it's going to be good, if that could have been the cure for some kind of disease, then I wish, even if it was, I wish I still wouldn't have done it. I didn't want to be that person. And I remember picking, it was a male, I remember picking him up with the gloves, because it was too heavy. The pie dish was this, and he was big, like, the pie dish, and I couldn't, like, take it and put it in the strainer and put it in. Like, I couldn't. It was just too big. And I opened the biohazard container, and it's almost full. Like, it's almost full. I'm holding him in my hands, and like, oh my god, this is just, what am I doing? And I take him, I put him in, and I remember he got stuck on the lid. And it turned around and his buttocks was in the air and his 2 feet were like dangling out, and I remember having to pick each one of his feet up and put him in the container and close the lid. And that was the hardest experience I've had there. I remember holding that fetus in my hands when everybody else was busy and started crying and opened the lid and put it back in. It's just really hard knowing that you're the only person who's ever going to hold that baby.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you had intact cases, which we've done a lot, so we've sometimes shipped those back to our lab in its entirety. Tell the lab it's coming. So don't open the box. Oh God.
And are we agreed that $100 would keep you happy?
I want a Lamborghini. I said I want a Lamborghini.
Don't we all, right? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the embodiment of the Democrat Party. They have no regard for life, no regard for fellow man, no regard for anything but greed and themselves. It is truly saddening, especially knowing that there are so many children out there who have been blessed with parents willingly and openly bringing them into the world. Just over the weekend at church, was talking with a really good friend of mine, and his daughter was born with spina bifida, and they knew before she was even born that she was going to have, that there were going to be complications. So they prayed what to do, and the answer that they received was, do what you have to do. And that was to welcome this lovely little girl into existence. None of it was without complications. She had surgeries before she was even born. The doctors told her parents that she would probably never walk. And it's now been 6 or 7 years since she was born, and I jump for joy every time I get to see her. Why? Because she motivates me. She motivates me to keep going. Every week I see her, she's running the halls of the church. On 2 feet. Absolutely defies all logic. The Lord works mighty miracles in the smallest of people. And He's able to take some of the largest giants and humble them into the smallest of beings. I'm so blessed that I know this little girl. We have 2 other little girls at church who have defied the odds. One of them fought cancer. Another one has problems that she will have to deal with the rest of her life. All 3 of these little girls are absolutely gorgeous. But it is the light of Christ that is within them. It gives so much hope. I wish and hope and pray that if you are listening right now, you share that message of that audio clip, of those videos. Blast them all over social media. Throw it right back in their face. Because that's what they do to you. People didn't believe what Hitler was doing until they actually saw it with their own eyes. We all know how much joy you can get from having a child or seeing a child of someone else. It is joy beyond all measure. And when you can put these videos in front of someone else who is either on the fence or has fallen off the wagon completely and is supporting that atrocious group, Planned Parenthood, then we can start talking and start making a change. If you need somebody on your side, please get out there on Twitter. Find a good friend of mine. Her Twitter handle is @PullItABunny. Jump in with her. If we give up this fight, we've got nothing else to fight for. Now, when we come back we're going to take another short little break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of things that happened on this day in history. And then, yes, as you know, somebody out there is stuck on stupid. We'll be right back.
K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com.
Not on my watch, our military service members say, as they volunteer to serve, as they move out, stand firm, and take fire. So not on our watch, we say, to the severely ill or injured veterans who can't get the care they deserve to live full and independent lives, even when there's no government funding or a nursing home seems like the only option. We won't leave one warrior behind. Not on our watch. Join us at findwwp.org.
Hey everybody, this is Jason, host of According to Me. I'd like to invite you to check out my show. It's a 2-hour show that lasts 60 minutes and...
listen, I hate to interrupt, but one thing I can do is read off a script. Just say, let me be clear a lot. It works.
President Obama, I can handle this. It's a radio promo. I'm not green. I've done this before.
Did someone say green?
Now, Al Gore is here. Listen, I'm just trying to record a radio promo. Do you mind?
Now, do you say good things about me on the show?
No, not at all. But if it makes you feel any better, I rip on Republicans just as much.
The AM radio frequencies give off very high levels of radiation.
Look, my show is on the internet, which you invented. Can I just do my promo?
I got a pen. I can veto that, you know.
I know you got a pen. It's not a law. It's a radio promo. Listen, just listen to my show. Barack Obama and Al Gore hate it, so you're going to love it.
Here's an executive order. Don't listen to his show. He doesn't like me. He's racist. And he doesn't recycle either.
That's it. I'm done. It's According to Me, Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on the 405.
Conservative in a world of liberal.
The Stafford Voice.
All right, we are back. We only have a few more minutes. We're going to try and wrap this up so we can finish on time. Wow, we've packed a lot into 1 hour tonight. But on this day in history, you know, back in 79, the year 79. Yes, 79. This big, huge volcano, you know, Mount Vesuvius, you know, it erupted. It's over in southern Italy, and it devastated the Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. At the time, these two cities lived at the base, and yeah, they thrived. Well, in Pompeii, there were 20,000 people, and roughly 5,000 living in Herculaneum. Well, according to accounts and records, the time of the day which it happened was around noon, so middle of the day, when Vesuvius exploded, and it sent a 10-mile-high mushroom cloud of ash and pumice, and it took roughly 12 hours for it all to fall, and those who stayed were either burned to death or asphyxiated. And one account from some guy named Pliny the Younger. Pliny the Younger, well, he says that it lasted roughly 18 hours, and that Pompeii was buried under 14 to 17 feet of all of this falling debris, the ash and the pumice. Well, it wasn't unearthed until a farmer found some remains under his vineyard in 1748. And, well, if the big one hits again in what they considered the death zone, there's roughly 700,000 people that stand to be affected. So on this day in history, back in 79, Mount Vesuvius erupted. Not to be outdone, over here in the States, in the year 1814, which happened to be part of the War of 1812, I can't ever remember when that was, but the British troops, they set fire to the White House. And it was done out of retaliation for the American attack on York in Canada. Well, the British troops made their way into Washington, D.C., and President James Madison and Dolly, his first lady, they had already fled to Maryland. 2 days before the British troops got there, Madison left. He went to go meet with his generals, but before he left, he asked Dolly to gather important papers and to, when the time was right, to flee. Well, the next day came and, well, she fled, but without any personal belongings at all. Instead, she saved a portrait of George Washington, which later turned out to be a copy. Well, on this day in history, the British troops set fire to the White House. Madison's never lived in the White House again. It wasn't until 1817 when President James Monroe moved into the newly reconstructed White House. A couple fascinating facts right there. Okay. Yes, with that heavy sigh and that goofy music in the background, it is time for another episode of Who Said That? This week, wow. I mean, we've highlighted this guy before, completely stuck on stupid. I think he lives in some weird fantasy world where he thinks he's smarter than he really is, but in reality, he's completely stuck on stupid, has no idea what to say or do. And this little sound clip highlights just that. You can't even put it into words other than just letting him say it for himself.
Dealing with things that aren't actual problems that affect Americans. Benghazi. The latest is the email scandal. Oh, no. I mean, is this a scandal? I keep trying to be fair about it. Trying to find some reason I should be upset with Hillary for using her, work server when it should have been her home server or vice versa. And I just can't find a there. It still reminds me of the blowjob now. Okay, so... You know, yes, he lied under oath, technically. But even if it's something, even if it's everything you say, is it as important as climate change? Okay, that is the smoking gun that I'm going to pick up and blow my brains out because I am so tired of it.
Oh my God. This is the smoking gun he's going to pick up and blow his brains out with. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, because this guy is the gift that keeps on giving the whole year, Clark. Okay, that was none other than ignoramus Bill Maher talking about the Hillary Clinton email scandal, and he's trying to figure out why it's such a big deal. He thinks, I mean, his ultimate question was, is this really a bigger deal than climate change? Yeah, that's because the climate changes every flippin' day, you dumbass. Oh my God. Listen, Bill, I don't know if you know this, but weather happens. It's not every day that classified documents are in the wrong hands and they're on private servers in a bathroom and you're being wiped clean or... Anyway, those jokes write themselves. This guy is completely stuck on stupid. Too stupid to insult. We're just going to leave it at that tonight. And you know what? We are out of time, and that is all we've got for this week. Wow, we packed a lot into tonight's show. And God willing, I, your host, Daniel Stafford, host of The Stafford Voice, will be back next week. Follow me on Twitter, at Stafford Voice. Look me up on Facebook. All you got to do is search for The Stafford Voice. I'm there. Let's get some talk going. Speaking of talk, if you've got questions, comments, concerns, or you've got a story or a tip, feel free to email them to me at thestaffordvoice@gmail.com. Again, thestaffordvoice@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and so much for your time. Until next week, thanks and God bless.